Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to begin in the 31st verse of John's 8th chapter, and we're going to try and make it all the way to the tail end of the chapter, which culminates in one of the claims which affirms his pre-existence, which is a significant component of his divine human duality, to which we are primarily indebted to of John amongst the gospel writers to that. And also it is provoked by controversy or a question. So whenever this man met, wherever this man walked, there was pretty much drama whenever he confronted religious rulers in their dens of iniquity. And this is another such location. Now, the first 11 verses of this chapter of being caught, if the woman caught in adultery does not appear, was almost certainly not written by John. It does not appear in the earliest manuscripts till circa 200 A.D. So, but then we do find him in the temple making his "I am the light of the world" claim, which naturally provokes misunderstanding and a controversy, which accelerates to this point. And he does not mince words in this dialogue either. He implicitly calls his antagonists slaves to sin, because unlike when he even in the earlier event of the woman in adultery, he says, "Who of you without first stone, who is without sin, cast the first stone." And we see that, so he makes that foundation, protects him from when he charges humanity of being enslaved to sin. And the Pharisees do not take kindly to that. Well, they understand the implication, and this provokes a hostility in it, and it's going to play in the interchange in which you're about to read. So the opening verse we're going to read is the 31st, which reads, "So Yahshua said to those Jews who believed him, 'If you stay in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free.'" So this is actually a combined sentence, and we tend to lose it when we isolate 832 from 831. And so we learn from the fuller verse that his audience is the Jews. He was making this statement in the company and presence of Jews, and he was in the temple among his own. And but he was offering the hand to them to follow him and be free from the spiritual shackles that their current religious system was in. And they did not take kindly to that answer. They answered, "We are the seed of Abraham, and we have been servants to no one at any time. How do you say you shall become free?" So this person was either blind or historically illiterate, because he was currently in bondage to Roman masters. Now, they were not as severely treated as they were in Egypt when they were manual slavers, but manual labor slaves, but they were still very much in bondage, and they were descended from a nation which became a nation, which was quickly put in bondage in the nation in which they came. And since then, throughout the period of Judges, they struggled with being enslaved by other nations and their struggle to assert their presence in the Promised Land. And since then, the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, and now the Romans had them, and the Muslims would have care of them for some time after. But this man was the quintessential spiritually proud Pharisaical Jew of his day, and he boasted that he was a descendant of Abraham, which he rested his eternal salvation on. And John the Baptist has some unkind words for these people in Matthew and Luke, when he says that the Father can take an inanimate object or the rock and make a son of Abraham. So clearly that is not a reliable foundation for salvation. And Yahshua answered him, "Truly, truly, I say to you, everyone doing sin is a servant of sin." Alternately translated as slaves in other translations, but the subordination and the control is it cannot be forced enough that he who submits to sin is in some sense controlled by it, not just by the sin that they are in, but the spirit of sin, which is of the adversary. And he always betrays his own. He lures you in with seductive snares and lures, but you have to learn to break away from them. You have to listen to the angel on your shoulder telling you the better path path her way, and that's a moment-by-moment crisis. So, but just thinking about it in preparation for when it comes does in fact help. And the servant does not stay in the house forever. A son stays forever. So the servant has no biological blood or attachment to the owner of the house, yet the son does, and they are destined to inherit the property, whereas the servant is temporary. And if then the son makes you free, you shall become free indeed. So all they have to do is accept his offer, and he will make good on the blessing tenfold, because these people had no idea that they were free, as evidence of the fact that they were enslaved and yet thought they were free. They were self-shackled in their mind to a legalistic religion. They were under the boot of Rome at this moment in time, and he thought he was free. So this really it speaks to us in our present day. We have our own forms of slavery which are unique to our culture. I know that you are the seed of Abraham, but you seek to kill me because my word has no place in you. So Abraham, and more extensively the Abrahamic promise, which is in their midst right now, was here in their midst, and they were trying to kill him, and yet they claimed to be the son of Abraham. Clearly, if they were the descendants of Abraham, they would know the Abrahamic promise in their midst, in their presence at that moment in time, but sadly that is not the case. I speak what I have seen with my father, and you do what you have heard from your father. And father, as we read, this is fast-forwarding to the 44th verse, is none other than the adversary. So he was setting up the 1-2, the first punch in a 1-2 hook of what would be fighting words by any measure. He likened their being sons of the adversary, and we're going to explain that more as we get to that chapter. But the seed is firmly planted in this verse. They answered and said to him, Abraham is our father. Yahshua said to them, if you were Abraham's children, you would do the works of Abraham. So they were not honoring their end of the covenant or entitled to the blessing as a result thereof. So claiming to belong to Abraham is all well and good, and it could be true for all we know, but if you are not living the faith-modeled life that he lived, then your claim is effectively worthless, and this was sadly the case with his present audience. But now you seek to kill me, a man who has spoken to you the truth, which I heard from Elohim. Abraham did not do this. So their motivation to murder him was fully in bloom at this point, and it ultimately culminates on the 18th chapter of this book, or in the 18th chapter. But he had already blasphemed himself in the temple in the 5th chapter. As far as they were concerned, he did so again in the 10th chapter, or we're not actually quite there yet, sorry. But this is something clearly Abraham would not approve of or partake or condone. The killing of the promised blessing in their midst would be anathema to Abraham. And you do the works of your father. Then he said to them, we are not born of whoring, for we have one father, Elohim. So the Jews fancied themselves the sons of Yahweh and Elohim, and they were in a very selective sense, but they tended to forget that all are created and endowed in the image. So every child, even those not bound to or entitled to the covenant blessings, are as much children of him as anyone else. Yahshua said to them, if Elohim were your father, you would love me, for I came forth from Elohim and am here. For I have not come of myself, but he sent me. So he is a substitute who is in every way equal to the Father who sent himself to humanity. In order to more fully gaze him, he took the physical forms of flesh and blood in order so that we could see an example through which we might live. And he was sent for that purpose. He did not come of his own volition. He was subject to divine design. In this place is the Son in a functionally subordinate but equal in essence relation within the father-son dynamic. Why do you not know what I say? Because you are unable to hear my word. So they were spiritually blind, and they could not receive or process or accept the invitation because their antennas were up for something they thought he was not, and their fatal misunderstanding of him and underestimation of him would be their fatal undoing. You are of your father the devil, and the desires of your father you want to do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and he has not stood in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaks the lie, he speaks of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. So there's a lot to digest here. One, tool of Satan will mimic their master and mimic his nature and his characteristics. And we read 3, murdering, that is anyone who's angry with their brother by the raising of the bar in the new covenant. And so every murderer is in a sense a tool of Satan, and because he doesn't want us to live, he wants to drag as many of us down here to the pits of hell. And no truth, that means he lies. He invented lying. He was the original liar, and thy father, the Hebrew term would have meant inventor of, or creator of. So it's not literally biological father, but those who lie and murder and do things which are satanic are mimicking their satanic father, who is in every sense their master. And because I speak the truth, you do not believe me. So they were unable to process the truth and unable to believe the truth. So they stayed stuck in the lies and their illusions, and they had no idea that he was offering them a way out of their current state of bondage, which would have been their crippling legalism. Who of you proves me wrong concerning sin? And if I speak the truth, why do you not believe us? This brings us back to the woman in adultery, where he says, he who is with sin not count the first stone. And in the 6th verse, we read of him taking a stick and writing. So that is the only written evidence that he ever wrote anything. Who is of Elohim hears the words of Elohim. Therefore you do not hear, because you are not of Elohim. So a simple side is established between those who hear and those who hear not. Those who hear belong to their own, they seek their own, they recognize the calling of their own and respond accordingly, whereas those who know not have no way of knowing what the one who is calling them the whole time can possibly be saying. The Jews answered and said to him, do we not say that you are a Samaritan and have a devil? So they were resorting to racial invective. This was the equivalent of the N-word in our own age. The Samaritans were considered less than Jews. They denied their claim to be sons of Abraham because they did not have pure blood, and they were very much the outcast of Judean society. And to call someone a Samaritan, he was from Galilee, which was north of Samaria, would have made him suspect, and it still would have been a slander, but to call him demon-possessed was actually unmistakable fighting words, but they packed no punch. Joshua answered, I do not have a demon, but I value my Father, and you do not value me. So he's implicitly elevating himself to an equality with the Father. How they treat him is very much how they treat the Father. The Father is trying to talk to them and tell them there is a new way, and it's not what you're currently doing, but they miss the billboard in their midst. And I do not seek my own esteem. There is one who is seeing and is judging. So he is subordinate in his motivation for his own esteem. He sacrificed himself and debased himself in order that the Father might be glorified, and he was lifted up on the cross, and ultimately lifted up in the resurrection. But truly, truly, I say to you, if anyone keeps my word, he shall never see death at all. In this he is not lying. The unfortunate reality is that no man can perfectly honor the word, or the law. So if you're looking to the law for your salvation, you're looking in the wrong location. The law will eventually expose yourself as a lawbreaker and render you unfit. It is through repentance and the atonement that we can be accepted, warts and all, to our heavenly homeland. The Jews said to them, "Now we know that you have a demon. Abraham died and the prophets, and you said, if anyone keeps my word, he shall never taste death at all." So they were saying he was demon-possessed because Abraham and the prophets were dead, and he was asserting their words as his own. And so this was, in their warped imaginations, evidence of a demon. If anything, that would make a more compelling case that they were the ones with the demon. "And you are greater than our father Abraham, who died, and the prophets died. Whom do you make yourself?" So they have an underestimation of the man they speak to, who is actually a pre-existent being who created Abraham and everything in the universe, but they do not know that, so their misunderstanding is almost understandable in this lens. Yahshua answered, "If I esteem myself, my esteem is none at all. It is thy Father who esteems me, and of whom you say he is your Elohim." So he claims no greatness apart from Elohim. He exists to express the greatness of his Father, so he is still in the mind of a servant. And you have not known him, but I know him, and I say I do not know him. I shall be like you, a liar. But I do not know him, but I know him, and I keep his word. So he is claiming a more intimate access and thorough knowledge of the Father being his very reflection and radiation. But they were set in their own ways. They had it backwards from their own educational error. Your father Abraham was glad that he should see my day, and he saw it and rejoiced. So Abraham, this was when the present was past. What was occurring right now, the Messiah in their midst, was once a dream and a prayer and a great hope of Abraham, who was endowed with the blessing at the Abrahamic dispensation. The Jews therefore said to him, "You are not yet 50 years old, and you have seen Abraham." He would have been anywhere between the ages of 30 and 33, because that is how long he lived on this earth, and that is when he began ministering at this point. But they raise the bar to 50 years old. He's obviously a younger man in our midst, and how is he claiming to be more ancient than the ancestor who birthed every one of us, including him? Yahshua said to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am." So this is the pre-existence, and the earliest reference you read of to is the Word was in the beginning, and the Word was with the beginning. The opening verse and the first four verses explain his pre-existence. He created creation and existed before him. He is an equally eternal being as the Father who sent him, and as such he also was created Abraham and everyone else. So that delineates the timeline they couldn't perceive it from. Therefore they picked up stones to throw at him, but Yahshua was hidden and went out of the temple, going through the midst of them, and so passed by. So they wanted to kill him at this point. They picked up the stones, but poof, like that, he was gone. There's a lot of details that the authors don't provide exactly how easily they got out of physical confrontations, but that's left to the imagination, and it's best accepted by faith that this is a reliable record, and I'm glad you're here. Stay tuned till next time. See you soon. Bye-bye.